Mira was sleeping peacefully in her small apartment when the sharp ring of her phone tore through the quiet night. The glowing screen showed unknown number, and the time read 3:27 a.m. She blinked several times, trying to focus, and reached for the phone. Groggily, she pressed the answer button. "Hello?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. On the other end was a stern, impatient voice. "You must bring the keys to your property immediately. Now." Mira froze. Her mind struggled to process what she had just heard. "Excuse me? Who is this?" she asked, sitting up in bed and clutching her blanket tightly. "This is the Homeowners Association. There is an urgent matter at your property. You need to deliver the keys right away," the voice repeated without any hint of explanation. Mira's heart began to race. Her property was in another city over 2 hours away. She had visited only a few days ago to check on some repairs, but everything had seemed fine. She had never received any emergency calls before. She tried to remain calm. "I don't understand. Why now? It is very late. Can this wait until morning?" "No. You must come immediately. There is no alternative," the voice insisted. Mira's mind began to swirl with confusion and disbelief. She tried to imagine what could possibly be so urgent that someone from the HOA would demand she drive in the middle of the night. Was there a break-in? A fire? Water leaking through the walls? Every thought seemed worse than the last. Her hands shook slightly as she hung up. She sat on the edge of the bed, trying to think clearly. She loved her home and had always taken care of it. She paid all her fees on time and followed every rule. Nothing like this had ever happened before. She wondered if this could be a mistake, a prank, or some sort of scam. But the voice had sounded official, calm, and urgent. Mira glanced at the clock again. 3:30 a.m. The city outside her window was silent. Even the streetlights seemed still. She rubbed her eyes and sighed deeply. She needed to make a decision. Should she call back the number and demand an explanation, or should she follow their orders? The idea of getting into her car and driving for 2 hours in the dead of night made her stomach twist with anxiety. She considered calling a friend for advice, but who would answer at this hour? She could call local authorities, but would they even intervene for an HOA issue? Her mind raced and the minutes felt heavier with each passing second. Mira decided to gather her thoughts. She grabbed a notebook and wrote down everything she could remember about the call, the time, the voice, the words. Writing it down made her feel slightly more in control. She made a plan to at least check the property remotely, but she realized she had no security cameras that she could access from her phone. Her mind returned to the thought of the drive, 2 hours on empty highways in the dark, with the fog rolling in from the outskirts of the city. The thought alone was exhausting, but the HOA's insistence haunted her. They had sounded so firm, as if her refusal was not an option. Mira felt trapped. She stood up and paced the room. Should she sleep a little more and ignore the call? Or should she go immediately and risk a long, uncomfortable drive for something that might not even be real? Her sense of responsibility for her property weighed heavily on her, as did the fear of being scammed. Finally, Mira made a decision. She would go. She would drive to the property, confront the situation, and get the answers she needed. Even if it turned out to be unnecessary, she would at least be prepared. She began to pack a small bag, water, snacks, her phone charger, and her wallet. She double-checked that her car had enough fuel. As she dressed in warm clothes, she felt a strange mix of fear and determination. The city outside was still quiet, and she could hear only the faint hum of distant traffic. Her heart beat fast, but she reminded herself to stay calm. This was not a normal situation, but she had handled unexpected events before. She had to remain clear-headed. Mira took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "I can do this. I will face it, and I will find out the truth." She grabbed her car keys and locked the apartment behind her. The cool night air hit her face as she stepped outside, and she felt both nervous and ready. The streets were empty, and the headlights of her car cut through the darkness as she started the engine. With a final glance at the quiet city, Mira pulled onto the highway, her mind full of questions and uncertainty. The journey ahead was long, and the answer to why she had been called would not wait much longer. Her adventure had begun in the middle of the night, and nothing would be the same once she reached her property. The highway was dark and quiet as Mira's car moved steadily through the night. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, and her eyes scanned the road ahead. Streetlights flickered in the distance, casting long shadows across the empty asphalt. The fog was thick in some areas, curling along the road like soft white ribbons. Mira felt a shiver run down her spine, but she reminded herself to stay calm. Every few minutes, she glanced at the clock on the dashboard. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Each mile marker she passed felt both closer and farther away from her destination. Her mind kept replaying the strange phone call. Why would the homeowners association demand her presence at such an hour? And why with such urgency? She had always been a responsible homeowner. She had paid every fee, followed every rule, and checked on her property regularly. Nothing unusual had ever happened. Mira tried to think logically. Maybe it was a real emergency. Perhaps something had gone wrong with the plumbing, or a security alarm had been triggered. But if that was true, why had they not called a local emergency service instead of waking her in the middle of the night? Every explanation seemed more confusing than the last. The highway was mostly empty, but Mira noticed a few cars in the distance. Some moved quickly, others slowly. Each car seemed to pass without acknowledgement, and the quiet hum of her engine felt louder than usual. The sound of tires rolling on asphalt became almost hypnotic, and Mira found herself gripping the wheel, a little tighter with each passing minute. Her phone lay on the passenger seat, silent now. She had considered calling someone for advice, but no one would answer at this hour. Even the police might not be helpful for an HOA problem. She felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She knew that if she ignored this call, something could go wrong at her property. She also knew that confronting this situation could be exhausting and stressful, but she had no choice. Mira reached for a bottle of water and took a slow sip, trying to calm herself. She focused on the road, noticing the faint outlines of trees on either side. The night seemed heavier here, away from the city lights, and the fog made everything look distant and unfamiliar. Her mind wandered to the possibility of a prank or scam. Could someone have called pretending to be the HOA? The thought made her uneasy, but she could not turn back. She needed to know the truth. As the minutes passed, Mira's anxiety grew. Every sound outside her car, an animal rustling in the trees, the distant roar of a truck, or the sudden flash of headlights, made her heart jump. She reminded herself to breathe slowly and keep her focus. She had always handled challenges carefully, and this night would be no different. The city skyline faded behind her, replaced by quiet suburbs and long stretches of dark road. She thought about her home, imagining the familiar rooms, the living room with its soft couch, the kitchen where she kept snacks, and the small balcony that overlooked a garden. Normally, these thoughts would make her feel calm, but tonight, they only reminded her of the strange urgency that had pulled her out of bed. After an hour on the road, Mira stopped at a small rest area. She needed to stretch her legs and shake off some of the tension. The air was cold, and she wrapped her coat tighter around her body. She leaned against the car and closed her eyes for a moment, taking deep breaths. The silence around her felt complete, almost unnatural. She glanced at the clock again. Only 30 more minutes to go. Back in the car, she started the engine again and continued her drive. The fog grew thicker in some areas, and Mira turned on the high beams, careful not to blind any oncoming drivers. Her mind wandered back to the phone call. The voice had been sharp, commanding, and confident. Whoever it was had not hesitated for a moment. That certainty made her wonder if she was walking into something far more serious than she realized. She kept imagining scenarios. Maybe there was damage at her property. Maybe someone needed access urgently. Or maybe it was just a mistake that had somehow become urgent to them. Mira tried not to panic. She reminded herself that she had driven long distances before and faced unexpected situations. She had always stayed calm, and she could do it again. Finally, after another 30 minutes of tense driving, Mira saw the familiar signs of her neighborhood. The streetlights glowed faintly through the fog, and she recognized the first few houses near her property. Relief mixed with exhaustion as she approached the driveway. Her mind was still racing, but she knew she was almost there. She parked her car and took a moment to steady herself. Mira stepped out of the car, the cold night air hitting her face. She looked at her house, quiet and still, and wondered what awaited her inside. The strange phone call had thrown her into a night she would never forget, and now the answers were just steps away. She gripped her bag tightly and walked toward the front door, ready to face whatever awaited her. Mira's heart beat faster as she approached her property. The night air was chilly, and the faint glow of the streetlights gave the neighborhood a quiet, almost eerie feeling. Her car's tires crunched on the gravel driveway, and she felt a mix of relief and anxiety. After driving for over 2 hours, she had finally arrived, but the reason for the urgent call was still a mystery. The front door of her house was dark and silent. She gripped her bag tightly, making sure her phone and keys were ready. Every shadow around the house seemed to move slightly in the dim light, and Mira's imagination ran wild. What if there had been a break-in? What if the caller had been serious about an emergency? She shook her head, telling herself to stay calm. She had made the long drive to find answers, not to panic. As she stepped closer to the door, she noticed a figure standing under the porch light. It was a man in a neat uniform holding a clipboard. His expression was calm, almost too calm, and his presence made Mira uneasy. "Are you Mira?" he asked politely, but there was a hint of impatience in his tone. "Yes, I am Mira," she replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "You called me about my property?" "Yes," the man said, adjusting his clipboard. "We need access to your home to address a matter that requires your authorization. Please provide the keys." Mira's brow furrowed. "Authorization? What matter? Why didn't anyone else handle it?" The man's lips pressed into a thin line. "The regulations require the homeowner to provide direct consent. We are only following procedure. I apologize for the timing, but this matter is urgent." Mira's mind whirled. She had faced challenges before, but this was different. Driving through the night for a mystery she did not understand was exhausting. She wanted answers, and now she would finally get them. "Show me what this is about," she said firmly. The man nodded and stepped aside, motioning toward the side of the house. "Please follow me. It is more efficient to inspect the issue together." Mira walked carefully, her shoes crunching against the gravel. The man led her to a side door where the faint glow of a flashlight revealed a small water leak near the kitchen. Mira's stomach relaxed slightly. It was a minor plumbing issue, nothing dangerous, nothing life-threatening. She looked at the man, trying to keep her irritation calm. "This is what required me to drive here in the middle of the night?" Mira asked, her voice controlled but sharp. "Yes," the man replied. "The regulations are clear. The homeowner must authorize any access, even in minor situations. We are sorry for the inconvenience." Mira's hands tightened on her bag. "You could have called during the day. You could have hired a local service. Waking me at 3 in the morning for... This is unreasonable." The man nodded again, but he did not argue. "We understand your frustration. The rules are strict and we must follow them. If it were possible, we would have delayed until morning, but the formality required immediate authorization." Mira took a deep breath, her anger mixing with exhaustion. She realized that the night, the long drive, and the anxiety she had felt were all part of a system that prioritized rules over practicality. She handed over the keys, her fingers brushing the metal coldly. "Here are the keys. Please fix the leak quickly." The man took them and smiled politely. "Thank you. We will take care of it immediately." Mira watched as he moved toward the kitchen, flashlight in hand, inspecting the small leak. The tension that had filled her body began to ease slightly. She felt a mix of relief and lingering irritation. She had faced the unknown, and while the situation was not dangerous, it had tested her patience and determination. She stepped back into the living room, taking a moment to look around. Everything was as she had left it days ago. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the neat arrangement of furniture, and the faint glow of a nightlight in the hallway made her feel at home again. She realized that even though the situation had been stressful, she had remained calm and handled it with courage. Mira sat on the couch for a moment, her mind replaying the long drive and the unexpected call. She knew that the experience would stay with her for a long time. It reminded her that sometimes life could demand sudden action even when it seemed unnecessary. But she had faced it, and she had done so with determination. Finally, the man returned from the kitchen, closing the door behind him. "Everything is under control now," he said. "The leak is fixed and your home is safe." Mira nodded, a small smile forming despite the exhaustion. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate that it is taken care of. I hope next time, communication will be better." The man nodded and left, walking back toward the driveway. Mira watched him go, feeling a mixture of relief, frustration, and pride in herself. She had confronted a difficult situation, navigated uncertainty, and emerged calm and in control. As she locked the front door behind her, Mira realized that the night had tested her patience and courage in ways she had not expected. The call at 3:27 a.m. had seemed impossible to handle at first, but she had faced it and managed to resolve it. She took a deep breath and looked at the quiet street, knowing that despite the frustration, she had grown stronger from the experience. Mira returned to her car, feeling the cool night air on her face. The house was safe, the leak was fixed, and she was ready to drive back home. The journey had been difficult, but she had handled it with calm and determination. She started the engine and prepared for the drive back, knowing that she would remember this night for years to come. Mira slid into the driver's seat, exhausted but relieved. The leak at her property had been fixed, and the man from the homeowners association had assured her everything was under control. She started the engine, listening to the quiet hum of the car, and pulled out of the driveway. The night felt colder now, and the air carried a faint mist that clung to the edges of the road. At first, the drive seemed calm. Mira focused on the road ahead, keeping her hands steady on the wheel. The city lights in the distance faded as she drove toward the highway. Her mind wandered to the events of the night, the sudden call, the long drive, the confusion, and finally confronting the HOA representative. She felt proud of herself for staying calm and handling the situation. But as the miles passed, a creeping sense of tension returned. The roads were empty, and the silence felt heavier than before. Mira could hear only the faint hum of her tires and the soft sound of the wind brushing against the car. Every shadow seemed to move. Every curve of the road looked unfamiliar, and her heart occasionally skipped a beat. She reminded herself to focus on driving and not let her imagination take over. About 30 minutes into the drive, Mira noticed a car following her. At first, she thought it might be coincidence, but the vehicle mirrored her movements, staying at a steady distance behind her. The headlights glowed in her rearview mirror, and a knot of anxiety formed in her stomach. She considered taking an exit, but the highway was almost deserted. She adjusted her speed slightly, watching the car, and wondered why it seemed to follow her without reason. Mira's thoughts raced. Could it be someone from the HOA? It did not make sense. They had no reason to follow her. Perhaps it was just a late-night driver with the same destination. She tried to calm herself, but her palms were sweaty, and her heart was pounding. She reminded herself that she had faced a tense situation earlier and had handled it with patience. She could manage this as well. She decided to take the next rest area to let the car behind pass. Mira slowed down, signaling as she turned into the empty parking lot. The other car passed without stopping, continuing down the highway. Mira exhaled, slowly, feeling a mix of relief and lingering unease. The silence returned, but her mind stayed alert, scanning the road for any further surprises. As she resumed driving, fog began to gather in patches along the highway. Visibility dropped, and the familiar sounds of the road seemed muted. Mira turned on her high beams carefully, trying to see through the thickening mist. Every tree along the roadside seemed taller, every shadow darker. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles turning white. The drive was no longer just about distance. It was about focus, endurance, and patience. Mira reminded herself to stay calm and not let fear control her. She replayed the night, in her mind, thinking about the lessons she had already learned. The sudden call had forced her out of bed, the long drive had tested her endurance, and confronting the HOA had tested her patience. Each challenge had been difficult, but she had handled them all. She could handle this drive back as well. About an hour later, she reached a stretch of the highway that cut through a forested area. The fog was thick here and visibility dropped to almost nothing. Mira slowed down, driving cautiously. The headlights illuminated only a few meters ahead, and the faint sounds of animals moving in the underbrush made her heart beat faster. She stayed focused on the road, keeping her speed steady and her eyes alert. Suddenly, the car in front of her swerved slightly, causing Mira to brake gently. She saw that it was only a deer crossing the road, moving quickly into the trees. Her pulse began to slow, and she reminded herself that she needed to stay patient. Driving at night could be unpredictable, but she was capable and careful. She focused on her breathing and continued forward, determined to reach home safely. Hours seemed to stretch endlessly as Mira drove through the night. She passed familiar towns and empty intersections, the quiet of the early morning settling around her. She thought about the strange phone call, the urgency that had pulled her from bed, and the unnecessary panic it had caused. Yet, despite the inconvenience and anxiety, she felt a quiet sense of pride. She had faced every challenge head-on, made careful decisions, and had kept herself calm under pressure. Finally, the first signs of the city appeared on the horizon. Streetlights glimmered through the fog, and the distant hum of early traffic grew louder. Mira's heart lifted as she realized she was almost home. The long drive, the tension, and the exhaustion would soon be behind her. She focused on the familiar roads, feeling more relaxed with every mile. Mira took the final turn into her neighborhood and parked outside her apartment. She turned off the engine and let out a deep breath. The night had been difficult, full of confusion, tension, and unexpected challenges, but she had handled it all. She had faced the call at 3:27 a.m., made a long drive, confronted the HOA, and managed to remain calm and composed throughout. As Mira stepped out of the car, the cool morning air greeted her. She looked at the quiet streets, the buildings bathed in the soft glow of early light, and felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. The ordeal was over, and she had learned that she could handle unexpected challenges with patience and courage. She locked her car and walked toward her apartment, ready to rest and finally enjoy the peace of her home. Mira finally reached her apartment and closed the door behind her. The quiet hum of the building felt comforting after the long night. She set her bag down and sank onto the sofa, letting out a deep breath. Her body was tired, and her mind was still racing from the events of the early hours. The strange phone call, the unexpected drive, and the confrontation at her property had left her feeling both exhausted and restless. She poured herself a cup of tea, hoping the warmth would help her calm down. Sitting by the window, Mira watched the city slowly wake up. The first rays of sunlight began to shine through the blinds, casting soft light across the room. Birds chirped faintly outside, and the distant sounds of cars moving through the streets reminded her that life was continuing as usual. Mira thought about the HOA and the urgency that had pushed her to drive 2 hours in the middle of the night. She still did not understand why they had chosen such an extreme approach. A minor plumbing leak should never have caused her to wake up and travel in the dark. She shook her head, feeling a mixture of frustration and disbelief. She had followed all the rules, paid all her dues, and yet she had been treated as if she had ignored her responsibilities. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text message from the HOA office, thanking her for providing access and confirming that the leak had been repaired. Mira read it and felt a mixture of relief and irritation. They had handled the situation, but the process had been unnecessary and stressful. She wondered if anyone there understood the impact of their decisions on homeowners like her. Mira reflected on the long night and realized something important. Despite the fear, confusion, and exhaustion, she had remained calm and focused. She had handled every challenge that came her way. From the initial call to the drive, the confrontation, and the return journey, she had relied on her patience and courage. The experience had tested her, but it had also shown her how capable she was under pressure. She decided to call her best friend, Lena, to share what had happened. Lena picked up on the second ring, and Mira began recounting the strange events in detail. She described the call at 3:27 a.m., the drive through the empty highway, the fog, and finally the confrontation with the HOA representative. As she spoke, her frustration became clearer, and she could feel the tension of the night leaving her body. Lena listened quietly, then said, "Mira, you handled this perfectly. Most people would have panicked or refused to go. You stayed calm, drove safely, and confronted the situation with confidence. That shows real strength." Mira smiled, feeling a little lighter. Talking to someone who understood helped her process the night's events. She realized that while the situation had been stressful, she had grown from it. She had learned the importance of staying calm under pressure, thinking clearly in unexpected situations, and trusting her own judgment. After the call, Mira decided to take a short walk outside. The city streets were busy now, filled with people going to work and children heading to school. The bright morning sunlight felt different from the quiet, dark night she had experienced. The world seemed calmer, more predictable, and she appreciated the ordinary rhythm of life. Mira thought about her property and the homeowners association again. She decided she would write a letter to the HOA office, explaining her experience and suggesting a better way to handle minor emergencies. She wanted to make sure that no other homeowner would have to face a 2-hour drive in the middle of the night for a small plumbing issue. Writing the letter made her feel empowered. She could turn the stressful experience into something positive. By mid-morning, Mira had regained her energy. She made a light breakfast and enjoyed it slowly, appreciating the quiet and safety of her apartment. She reflected on the lessons from the night and realized that she had faced fear, uncertainty, and frustration, but had not let them control her actions. She had handled the situation with maturity and confidence. Mira knew that this night would remain in her memory for a long time. It had been challenging, unexpected, and exhausting, but it had also shown her what she was capable of. She had faced the unknown, made careful decisions, and protected her property. Most importantly, she had proven to herself that she could remain calm and strong even in difficult circumstances. As she looked out the window one last time before getting ready for her day, Mira felt a sense of peace. The world was full of surprises, some stressful and some confusing, but she had the courage and patience to face them. The morning sunlight filled her apartment and she smiled, ready to start her day with a new sense of confidence and resilience. Mira spent the morning reflecting on the events of the night. She knew that while the leak had been fixed, the experience had revealed a larger problem. The homeowners association had followed rules without considering the human consequences. She decided she would take action to prevent such unnecessary stress in the future. She opened her laptop and began drafting a letter to the HOA office. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she considered the best way to communicate her experience. She wanted the letter to be clear, professional, and firm, but not angry. She began by describing the phone call at 3:27 a.m. and the urgency that had been demanded. She wrote about the long drive, the fear she had felt on the empty highway, and the exhaustion she had endured. Mira paused and took a deep breath. She wanted to ensure that the HOA understood the impact of their actions. She explained that while she understood the need to authorize access for repairs, the timing and approach had been unreasonable. She suggested that minor issues be handled during regular hours or through local services when the homeowner was not nearby. As she typed, Mira felt a sense of empowerment. Writing the letter gave her control over a situation that had previously felt chaotic. She knew that she could turn this stressful experience into a constructive outcome. By communicating clearly, She could help the HOA improve its procedures and prevent other homeowners from facing the same difficulty. After finishing the letter, Mira reviewed it carefully. She checked for clarity, tone, and accuracy, ensuring that her points were understood without sounding confrontational. Satisfied, she sent the email to the HOA office, feeling a sense of relief. She knew that her voice had been heard and that she had taken a positive step forward. With the letter sent, Mira decided to take a short walk to clear her mind. The sun was higher in the sky now and the streets were full of life. People were walking dogs, going to work, and carrying groceries. The normal rhythm of the city was comforting after the unusual events of the night. Mira felt the warmth of the sunlight on her face and appreciated the ordinary moments she had almost taken for granted. As she walked, her mind wandered back to the long drive. She realized that the experience had tested her patience, courage, and judgment. Driving in the dark, facing the fog, and confronting an unfamiliar situation had been challenging, yet she had handled it calmly and carefully. The night had shown her that she could trust herself in unexpected situations. Mira returned home and made herself a light lunch. She felt a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. The night's ordeal was behind her, but the lessons remained. She decided that from now on she would take proactive steps to avoid unnecessary stress. She would keep her property well maintained, maintain open communication with the HOA, and set clear expectations about emergency situations. After lunch, Mira checked her phone and found a reply from the HOA office. They had acknowledged her email and promised to review their procedures for future situations. Mira felt a sense of accomplishment. She had turned a stressful night into an opportunity to create positive change. She spent the afternoon organizing her property documents and making notes about maintenance schedules. By taking control of her responsibilities, Mira felt more secure and confident. The events of the previous night had reminded her that preparedness and communication were essential in avoiding unnecessary difficulties. Mira also reflected on her own reactions during the night. She realized that staying calm, thinking logically, and making careful decisions had been crucial. Fear and frustration were natural, but they did not have to control her actions. She had managed to face an unexpected challenge and come through it with patience and composure. As evening approached, Mira prepared a cup of tea and sat by the window. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink. She felt a sense of peace. The night's chaos had taught her lessons about responsibility, courage, and self-confidence. She knew that future challenges might arise, but she now trusted her ability to handle them. Mira took a deep breath and smiled. The night that had started with fear and confusion had ended with clarity and empowerment. She had faced uncertainty, made thoughtful decisions, and taken steps to prevent similar stress in the future. She realized that even difficult experiences could lead to growth if approached with patience and courage. By the time the sun had set, Mira felt calm and prepared for the days ahead. She knew that the strange call at 3:27 a.m. would be remembered as a turning point in her life. It had been stressful, but it had also taught her valuable lessons about herself, responsibility, and the importance of clear communication. Mira felt ready to face whatever challenges might come next, confident in her ability to handle them with grace and determination. Mira woke early the next morning, feeling a sense of calm she had not experienced since the night of the strange phone call. The events of the previous day replayed in her mind: the sudden call at 3:27 a.m., the long drive through fog and darkness, the confrontation with the HOA representative, and the tense drive back home. The memory of exhaustion was still fresh, but it was mixed with pride. She had handled everything with courage and patience. She decided to take a walk through her neighborhood, letting the morning air refresh her. The streets were alive with activity, children laughing on their way to school, neighbors chatting as they walked dogs, and shopkeepers opening their stores. The city felt familiar and welcoming, a sharp contrast to the quiet, tense highway of the night before. Mira felt the simple comfort of everyday life more deeply than ever. As she walked, she thought about the lessons she had learned. The call from the HOA had forced her to act quickly and responsibly. It had tested her patience, her calmness, and her ability to think under pressure. Yet she had managed each challenge carefully, making the right decisions even when fear and uncertainty tried to take control. Mira realized that these experiences had strengthened her confidence. She now trusted herself to handle unexpected situations with clarity and composure. Mira also reflected on her actions after the incident. Writing the email to the HOA had been empowering. It had allowed her to take control of a situation that had initially felt out of her hands. The positive response she received from the office reassured her that her voice mattered. She knew that advocating for herself and for others could make a difference. She had turned a stressful situation into an opportunity to improve communication and prevent similar problems in the future. Back at her apartment, Mira organized her belongings, checked her property documents, and made a list of maintenance tasks for the coming weeks. She wanted to ensure that her home was always prepared and that she could avoid any emergencies that required sudden action. Planning ahead gave her a sense of security and control. Mira also thought about the importance of balance in life. The night's events had reminded her that responsibility and rules were important, but so was common sense. She decided she would set boundaries with the HOA and any other organizations in the future. She would communicate clearly about what could be handled by others and what required her attention personally. She realized that protecting her time and peace of mind was as important as following rules. In the afternoon, Mira called her friend, Lena, to share her reflections. Lena listened attentively as Mira spoke about the lessons she had learned and how she felt stronger after facing such a stressful situation. "You handled everything perfectly," Lena said. "Not everyone could stay calm and make the right choices in a situation like that. You proved how capable and determined you are." Mira smiled. Talking with Lena made her feel lighter, and she appreciated having someone who understood her experiences. She realized that sharing challenges and reflecting on them with others was a way to grow and strengthen her confidence. Later, Mira decided to visit her property once more during the daytime. She wanted to ensure that everything was in order and to see her home in the calm light of day. Driving there in the morning was a very different experience. The roads were busy but predictable, and the sun illuminated every familiar landmark. She felt relaxed, enjoying the clarity and comfort of daylight after the tense night drive. At her property, Mira inspected the repairs. The minor plumbing leak had been completely fixed, and there were no other issues. Seeing everything in order brought a sense of satisfaction. She felt proud that she had acted responsibly and followed through despite the initial stress. The experience had taught her not only patience, but also the importance of attention to detail and preparedness. Returning home, Mira felt lighter than she had in days. She realized that the unusual night had been a turning point. It had reminded her of her strength, her ability to stay calm, and the importance of taking control when situations seemed uncertain or stressful. She knew that unexpected challenges would come in the future, but she now had the confidence to face them with grace and determination. As evening approached, Mira sat by her window, watching the sky turn golden with the setting sun. The city was calm again, the streets quiet, and the world seemed peaceful. Mira smiled to herself, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and frustration, but she had emerged stronger and more confident. The strange call at 3:27 a.m. had been unsettling, but it had taught her valuable lessons about patience, responsibility, and self-trust. Mira realized that life would continue to bring surprises, both small and large, but she was ready. She had discovered the importance of staying calm, thinking clearly, and taking action when needed. She had learned to advocate for herself and plan for the future while maintaining her peace of mind. With these lessons, she felt prepared for whatever came next. As night fell and the city lights twinkled outside her window, Mira took a deep breath and reflected on her journey. She had handled an unexpected challenge, navigated uncertainty, and protected her home. The night of confusion and urgency had become a story of strength, growth, and resilience. Mira smiled, knowing that she was capable, determined, and ready to face whatever life had in store.